Right, hi, welcome to the Dog Sports Decoded podcast. I'm joined today by Monika Hoyer. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Today we're going to talk about benching out of our vehicle, primarily for dog shows, but just as we come into summer, it becomes more important, and I know we always start to hear sort of the public safety announcements about the dangers of leaving your dog in the car, and I know that's often a worry for people who do compete, but also whatever else you're doing with your dog, whether that's running errands or what have you, traveling in the summer. So Monika's going to join us today and show us a few different techniques that we can use to kind of keep the air temperature down in our cars so our dogs don't overheat, or to try and prevent some of that overheating. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
Before we jump into kind of the benching techniques, keeping our car cool, do you want to just tell us a little bit about sort of your experience benching out of your car, either in shows or traveling or what have you?
For sure. So I am a solo traveler, and that's probably one of the biggest hang-ups that we have when it comes to traveling with our dogs, is the ability to safely step away from our vehicles, either to go into a competition venue, do our runs, that sort of thing, and ensure that our dogs are actually safe in our vehicles, properly contained, while also receiving the amount of airflow and the cooler temperatures that they require to be comfortable. And I spent quite a bit of time sort of figuring out how I can travel with my dogs, not constantly have somebody at their side, but still be able to be safe and to communicate with other people that my dogs are safe, and to essentially keep them happy and comfortable. Specifically, I have dogs who don't actually enjoy benching inside of venues. They stress in their crates. I have dogs who don't compete who travel with me as well. Sometimes they're not allowed in venues if they're not competing actively in the sport. So what I've sort of worked out over time is that I can keep my dogs fairly comfortable inside my vehicle without having to worry about overheating, and to the point that often my vehicle's cooler than my camper, and it's sometimes even cooler than the venue, and it's often more comfortable than sitting outside my vehicle in the summer. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of really important to touch on as well, because as much as air temperature is definitely a concern in our car, when we're benching at a trial or attending class, or wherever you're traveling with your dogs, often it's just easier and more comfortable to bench out of your car. So, maybe less sound traveling, so a little more sound barrier, but also just your gear's all here, you've got a chair, it's a little more comfortable sometimes than setting up where there's not a lot of space inside a venue.
You definitely don't have to carry as much stuff in and out of the building, which is nice. Yeah. And I find my dogs rest a little bit better between their runs in the vehicle as well, because they're not watching the other dogs compete. They're not having a ton of foot traffic coming back and forth. I find too, it also makes pottying them between their runs a little bit easier, because we get out of the car, we go to have our potty break, and then we run into the building, we do our run, back to the potty break, and back in the car, and we're not going in and out of the building a whole lot, creating a lot of foot traffic, a lot of distraction for other competitors, or a lot of stress for other dogs being in crates.
And we talked about this a little bit before shooting, but also if you have multiple dogs, like you said, you're only competing with one at a time. You have to have some place to put your other dog. So whether you're benching in your car or in a building, somehow you're going to have to arrange for that. So,
for sure.
So I think you'd suggested we're going to start by seeing where we're going to set up our vehicle?
Yeah, where we're going to set up, why our vehicle heats up, and what we can do to prevent that.
Okay, so I'm going to jump behind the camera and film that a little bit closer so we can move around a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So the main reason that your vehicle heats up is because it's essentially a greenhouse. Your vehicle's not insulated. That's why it gets so cold in the winter and so hot in the summer. It's also got a lot of glass, so the sun's heat, the radiation, is pumping into this vehicle right now. We're parked under kind of full sun out here in this field today. And we've got essentially a really great plant growing environment, but not a great dog housing environment or people housing environment inside this vehicle right now. Weather forecast today says that it's currently about 15 degrees out here, 14 to 15 degrees Celsius. I have a thermometer in my vehicle. It's been sitting here while we've been setting up. So I'm just gonna grab that really quickly and see what our internal temperature of the vehicle is right now. So today we're sitting at about 15 degrees Celsius based on the weather forecast. We're sitting out in full sun. I just pulled this thermometer out of my closed car and it says 29.8 degrees Celsius. So that's quite the difference between the outside air temperature, which we would actually consider quite a mild day. We're both wearing our sweaters, but my vehicle is like a nice warm summer day right now, and that's just from sitting here with the doors and the windows shut. So the first thing we could consider when we're going to a venue would be, where should I park? And it's really nice to be able to sort of cheat a little bit before you go to a competition. When you get your venue information, pull it up on Google Maps. And Google Maps will have a satellite image of the parking lot, where there will be trees, where there will be the building, and you can cheat ahead of time. There's trees over there. Yeah. You can cheat ahead of time when you go to a venue and sort of plan where you're going to park when you arrive days in advance, based on knowing that the sun sits in the south half of our sky. You're gonna get morning sun in the east, afternoon sun in the west, and you can pick out where the shady spots are going to be. I am gonna warn you though, this only works the first day. By the second day, everybody else saw that you had the shady parking spot when you pulled in, and if they get there before you, they're gonna beat you to the shady parking spot. But that's the first thing I do actually, is I check the map to see where the shade's likely to be throughout the day in the parking lot.
And when you're looking at that, you're kind of judging based on sort of your front windshield and rear windshield?
You know, it depends. Sometimes you don't have an option. If I can choose, I actually will point the nose of my vehicle towards the sun, so I'll try and point it south. If that doesn't work, then I'll try and go sidelong into the shade so that the majority of my vehicle is in the shade at any given point in time. But I generally do try to either be south facing or east facing. Usually trials are wrapping up towards mid-afternoon, and that's when you're gonna have a lot of that western sun. And by then you're usually getting ready to go home and it's not such a big deal. But that morning sun will heat your car up early, so you want to avoid that. And then the big problem is throughout the day when the sun's at its highest, you kind of want to be facing south. Now, for video purposes, we actually haven't faced my vehicle directly south today, because then you wouldn't be able to see anything. The sun would be in the way.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do that today, but my thought process behind that we'll go into a little bit when we talk about windows. But the only window on your vehicle that doesn't open is actually your windshield. So that's the one that we kind of want to insulate the most. And since we can't open it, and we're housing our dogs at the back of our vehicle usually, we face this one towards the sun. This is actually quite hot to the touch right now while I'm touching it. So that's the one that's going to heat up the most. These are the ones we can do something about. Leave this one in the sun and take care of these.
And so for most people, they've got the car they have, they're probably not going to go out right this moment and buy a new car just for benching their dog. So ideally, assume your setup is kind of an SUV or kind of more open, more flowy vehicle. But if you have a car, you're just going to kind of have to work with that as...
There's definitely still plenty of options for a car. Okay. And I definitely am one of those people that says not everyone should have to go out and buy the newest, biggest, most expensive...
Sprinter van?
Fanciest thing. No. This is a 2008. Yeah. So definitely if you're one person, one dog in a car, there's definitely options for you. And we'll talk about, as we go through, we'll talk about the options for smaller vehicles or tighter budgets. I've built my system over several years, but in the beginning it was old duvets from the thrift shop is where I started, and I used to have a Toyota Corolla. So awesome. I've kind of gone from Corolla to station wagon to full-size SUV.
You've seen it all.
Yeah. So definitely, and I've been there on the budget and stuff too. So there is no reason that you need the fanciest, newest, keeping up with the Joneses just to keep your dogs cool and comfortable in your vehicle.
Good news.
All right, so now that we understand why our vehicle heats up, the first thing we need to deal with is airflow. So when we have the air flowing in and out of this vehicle, we're not going to end up with that superheated air all trapped inside our vehicle. So the first thing I'm going to do after I've selected my parking space for the day is I'm going to open as many windows as possible, as wide as is safely possible for my vehicle, for my dogs, and for the space that I'm in. So I'm going to take a second, I'm going to open up all my windows, including my sunroof, which is a little bit more situational, and I'll talk about that during the shading process of the car. But for now, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to open up all my windows, and I think we'll see a pretty immediate change in the temperature inside the vehicle when I do that.
Awesome.
All right, so now I've opened up all of the windows inside my vehicle here, and that's going to make a pretty immediate difference in the internal temperature of the car. Now, we always hear cracking your window is not enough. So only opening your window up this much and having your dog in your vehicle, it's not going to work. It's still going to get really hot in there. But despite the fact that it's actually not a very windy day, there's going to be airflow through this vehicle because hot air and cold air constantly exchange places. So that's what causes drafts in our houses, is that air of different temperature moves into each other's space. And what happens when we heat the air up in here and then we have a window open, the warm air is actually going to move out of the vehicle and the cold air is going to keep coming in to fill up that space. So you're going to have a constant exchange whether you have a breeze or not. Breezes make it better because it pushes things along faster. Fans make it better because it pushes things along faster. But no matter what, if you no longer have your air trapped inside this vehicle, it's going to immediately cool the vehicle down to have your windows. Notice I've gone as wide open as possible. All my windows are open, my back window is open, and I've opened my sunroof. So this is now basically, instead of a greenhouse, it's a gazebo. I've got airflow through my vehicle. That being said, we've still got sun coming in. It's still gonna get pretty hot if this vehicle is sitting in direct sunlight, especially if you're not lucky enough to have an overcast day.
I guess, like, even if you're attending a trial, it's 30 degrees out. Even if you're outside of your car in a chair or something, you're still hot. So
you're baking. Yeah, absolutely. So we don't want to bake our vehicle or our dogs at any point in time. I'm just going to grab the thermometer and see. We've only had this open for about as long as I've been talking here. And we went from 29 degrees to now it's 23 degrees Celsius from the dashboard there. Okay. So we've already dropped the temperature several degrees just because I opened up these windows and a bit of a breeze came through the car. So the biggest concern we have now that we have opened all of the windows on our vehicle is how do we keep our dogs inside of it? So if your dog rides loose, you have the potential that they are either going to go out of a window because they're excited, they want to go into the building, they want to play their game, they want to compete with the other dogs, they want to go play frisbee. We have an issue if we have dogs leaping outside of vehicles at venues running amok. But we also want to make sure that nobody well-meaning comes through and decides that our dogs must be in distress inside of our vehicles, therefore we need to release them, which risks somebody being bitten or a dog ending up on the road or missing or any of those things. So we want to take a couple of precautions when it comes to containing our dogs. Now, I'm fortunate enough that I first of all have a vehicle that the back window opens separately from the back hatch, which means if I were to put any sort of crate in the back of this vehicle and somebody tried to open it to get my dogs out, they actually wouldn't be able to open my crate. I'm also able to leave everything open and lock my vehicle so that they would not actually be able to open this hatch to access my vehicle. If they try and open my front door at this point, if my vehicle's locked, my alarm will go off. That's a pretty big deterrent. I have a vehicle that still requires a key in the ignition and it has an alarm system so that if somebody tries to even get into the vehicle just by reaching through and unlocking it, the alarm system will actually not register it's been unlocked, so it will still go off. You have to use the remote to unlock my vehicle. If I had a slightly different vehicle, it may mean keeping the front 2 windows closed to prevent people from accessing your steering wheel and your ignition. But for the most part, most vehicles these days have security systems in place that detect when a vehicle is opened without actually being disarmed. So lucky enough to have a situation where I can have my hatch open and my crates can't be opened, my dogs can't be removed from the car because my crates just don't open wide enough with the door shut.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. When I do have my back hatch open, often for convenience at a venue, if I have to switch dogs really quick, I also have the option on the crates that I personally own of locking my crates so that my vehicle can be open wider, but my crates are actually locked with a key so that they can't be removed. That being said, not everybody is in a position to purchase a very expensive locking aluminum crate. And I wouldn't expect people to have to do that. But if you have a vehicle that is large enough, you have some options for keeping your dogs contained in your vehicle without having a risk to them getting out or being released. Any old crate will do. You can lock just about any crate just with a bike lock to prevent it from being opened by somebody you don't want it to be opened by. And the crate prevents the dog from getting out of the car. But we also talked about what if you have a really small car and you don't have access to an SUV or a hatchback and you need to keep your dog in your car. They're a large dog, crate's not going to fit on the back seat. There are options to keep your dog contained in your car, such as a seatbelt harness, so that they are actually harnessed into your vehicle so they're not going to go out the window and join the run of the dog before it's their turn, which has unfortunately happened, and it's happened to me. I've had dogs escape from my crating and they've ended up on the flyball lanes when it's not their turn. And fortunately for me, every dog goes directly to the space that I need them to go to, so that's pretty good there. But a harness, ideally not a leash attached to a collar, because if your dog gets halfway out the window with a collar on, you don't necessarily want that. But a chest harness that attaches into your vehicle's seat belt, those are widely available and they can be used to prevent your dog from exiting your car without permission at that point. There are also leashes that are made that they're essentially a bike lock for your dog to prevent people from taking your dog if you are leaving them tied to a tree or a post while you're stepping in to, grab a hamburger or something and you're leaving them outside. They actually have designed leashes that can be locked like a bike lock, and you can use that with your dog in your vehicle so that nobody can come over and remove your dog for you. So they can't unbuckle themselves, but nobody you don't know can unbuckle your dog either. So there are options for people who don't have the large vehicles that if they can't get a crate into their car, if their dog's not crate trained, there are options to keep your dog contained with your windows still open.
And I see you've got your emergency information there. Is that something we'll talk about later, or
I wasn't planning to, but we certainly can. I keep emergency information in my vehicle just because of the amount that I travel solo. So if anything ever happens to me, people would need to know who to contact. This is just a pencil case and a Sharpie marker. And I just kind of carabiner it to a place where there's really high visibility in my vehicle, and I keep another one in my glove box because often emergency workers will look in obvious places for your ID and contact information for somebody. So what this has in it is it's just a zipper, and it's got slip leads, enough slip leads for both dogs who are kept back here, and these are just cheap leads. They've got a bit of paper with my dog's information on them.
It's like a wanted poster.
It is. It's a wanted poster. It's got their photo because my dogs all look different, so they can identify who my dogs are. Yeah. And in the case of Cody, I need to update my emergency information. Unfortunately, Cody's no longer with me, but I have his big issue was that Cody actually was deaf, so that he couldn't hear, and I wanted people to be aware of the fact that he's not going to come when you call him because he can't hear. And then I've got sort of their identifying information, their breed, their date of birth, and any medical information, and information that says that my animals are actually current on their vaccines too. So should one of my dogs panic in the event of an accident and nip or bite an emergency worker, I have actually declared that my dog's vaccines are up to date and they're of no danger to anybody's health.
And then was walking by your car and saw that and were worried about your dogs, even if you're not injured, it's not a car accident situation, they could get a hold of you instead of...
They sure can. My cell phone number is on this, as well as the number for my veterinarian. Their animal insurance information is all on here. But the other thing that I have done that I need to redo, I don't have it on the vehicle today, but I made little homemade magnets, because my crate is magnetic, and it basically has my cell phone number and a little message on it that says, if you believe this animal is in distress, please call or text this number and it will be answered. So that if I have stepped into, say I'm on a camping trip and I need to go into the corner store to grab some ice or some groceries to keep us going for another 2 weeks, I have a phone number on my vehicle that anybody who's walking by my vehicle and is worried about my animals can call me and let me know whether or not I need to kind of come out and check on them and talk to them and assure them that no, I haven't left them there for hours at a time, and yes, I will be right out, and I can actually drop everything I'm doing and I can just come out to my vehicle and talk to whoever needs to talk to me about my car.
I know I've heard a lot about that with just kind of within the dog community. A lot of people who are very responsible about their pets are worried about people breaking into their car, because they do see dogs left unattended, even especially if it was a warm day, like maybe not like today, but a warmer day. So something like that would kind of be peace of mind for you as an owner. But
yeah, I have to admit it's been more peace of mind for me as an owner. No one has ever used it. No one has ever called the cell phone number when I've left it. I have never returned to my vehicle. We hear all these horror stories, people returning to their vehicle and having a conflict with somebody. As far as I know, my license plate has never ended up on the internet. And all of these things. So I have never personally had a negative experience with a Good Samaritan trying to help my dogs, or concerned about my dogs, or concerned about how I'm handling them. I've never experienced that sort of negative interaction, but definitely I feel like having all of these things in place not only is protecting the safety of my dog, but also preventing me from having conflicts with people that I wouldn't otherwise have to have a conflict with. And for the most part, their hearts are in the right place.
Absolutely.
But it's just a lack of understanding and a degree of sensationalism that this is never a safe scenario. And sometimes it's a necessary scenario, and we do everything in our power to not have to have our dogs with us when the weather is not appropriate, but every so often we end up in a pinch.
Yeah.
And this is what we can do.
And if you're at a show, you've paid your entry fees, you want to go. It's like it'd be easy to leave the dogs at home and run to the grocery store without them, but if you're at a show, you can't show without your dogs.
Exactly. Or if you're on vacation.
Yeah.
And for the most part, when I travel, I camp, and I travel because I like to travel with my dogs. I like to take them hiking, I like to take them biking, and my vacations revolve around, is this dog friendly? Can I take my dogs with me? They're my best friends. Yeah. They're often the only company I have when I travel, but sometimes I gotta step into the store.
Yeah.
And this is how we do it without causing any harm. All right. Okay, so another thing that we need to talk about in the case of a dog who can't be contained in a crate, or possibly can't be contained by a harness or leash, is what we can do to keep our windows open while still containing our dog in our vehicle. And there are products out there. I don't currently have any that fit this vehicle, but I previously had what's called essentially a window sock, which is a sock that is a mesh material that pulls over your window essentially like a glove that goes over the top of your door frame.
Sounds a bit like pantyhose or something.
Pantyhose is a really good way to put it, because it's a very similar material, and it's a black material too. So for in the world of tinted windows, at a distance it actually looks like your vehicle is all closed up, but it allows the air to flow freely through. But it also, unless you have a dog who's going to sit there and stick their nose underneath and eventually worm their way out of your vehicle, which I never had, it's a physical barrier for your vehicle as well. So the window sock is one option, and it's basically just a stretchy screen that you pull over your car door when you're parked so that your window's open, but it's got a screen in the way. The other thing that they sell are essentially metal mesh screens that often you buy them custom made to your vehicle, so that you essentially have a metal mesh screen. You can put your window all the way down, but there's actually a barrier here. You'll see similar items on say like canine police vehicles as this mesh screen that contains the dog without having to keep the windows rolled up. Right. So there's options if you don't have the ability to crate or tether your dog inside your vehicle. There are options for having your windows down, but a barrier in your window or on your door that prevents your dog from getting out.
And I'm assuming the wind sock is the cheaper of the two options if you're just getting started. And
yeah, if you're just getting started,
in a whole custom deal, you better be sure you like your vehicle.
Exactly. Okay. If you're going to be changing your vehicle, you want to make sure that you kind of go with the more flexible option. The window socks, I find, are also generally designed more for slightly smaller vehicles. So your regular sedans versus your SUVs, they're a little bit more fitting to the doors. Mine fit okay on the front doors of this vehicle, but the back door of this vehicle is significantly wider than the window itself. So they didn't fit on my back windows, but they fit on my front windows just fine. And yeah, those are the cheaper option, the fabric sock, because they stretch and they fit multiple vehicles. The custom ones are actually fit to the shape of your individual vehicle's window, and that's based on make, model, and year. So definitely a more expensive option. All right, so now we've kind of covered airflow and dog containment. The next thing we want to talk about is how do we keep the heat from getting into the vehicle in the first place. So we talked about how the car is essentially a greenhouse, and that's because not insulated, and then the windows, the sun's heat just comes right through the glass and into the vehicle. And we talked about how we don't want to bake in the sun even if we're sitting outside in fresh air. So the next thing we need to do is essentially provide our own shade, especially if we haven't been able to find shade at our venue. We need to find our own shade. And it starts with something as simple as a windshield cover. And these have been around forever, and I used to not be a believer in windshield covers, partially because it was hard for me to find ones that fit my vehicles properly. But there actually are a whole bunch of options out there that I'd never considered before. So there's magnetic options and things like that. This one is pretty simple, but what a windshield cover is it's a thin foam, so it's insulated, and then it's covered in foil that's reflective. Sometimes they're only reflective on one side. Mine's reflective on both sides. But the idea is when you tuck this into your windshield, instead of the sun hitting the glass and coming through in to heat up the air inside your vehicle, it actually hits this material and bounces back off. So it reflects away from your vehicle. And then the bit of insulation helps a little bit too. Anything that doesn't bounce off gets kind of captured in the insulation of the cover. Now, there's a funny story about this particular windshield cover. I bought this vehicle used, and at the time it came with a custom fit windshield cover that I have never been so excited about a windshield cover in my life, because as I said, I've always really struggled to find properly sized windshield covers for my vehicles. Either they were too small and I couldn't keep them up in my windshield, or they were too big and I was knocking my mirror out of alignment and stuff every time I tried to wedge them in. And if that's your situation, don't throw them out, because we're going to talk about the uses for all of your failed windshield covers. I've kept almost all of mine. But I finally found out that you can actually buy windshield covers specifically for the make and model of your vehicle.
I had no idea.
Right? So I bought this vehicle used, and the previous owner had actually purchased one of these kind of properly custom fit windshield covers. And it fits right in the middle of my windshield. So I love this. I have now started using windshield covers even when I'm not traveling with my dogs, just to keep my car a more comfortable temperature when it's parked every day.
Yeah.
So I carry my windshield cover all the time, and I put it up, it takes 2 seconds, and it's great for kind of keeping my steering wheel and my dashboard cool. My air conditioning doesn't work anymore in this vehicle, so it's nice to get into a slightly cooler vehicle at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Now, the funny story about my precious windshield cover is that I was at a competition this past summer up in Red Deer, and I believe we were under a tornado watch, so severe windstorm warning at the very least. But it was also pretty warm, so I had my vehicle all set up, all my windows open, cover in the windshield, all my covers over top of the vehicle, and I was standing by the secretary's desk inside the venue, and the wind had come up and you could see stuff just kind of whipping by in the parking lot, and in the corner of my eye I saw something big and shiny go by, and I was kind of like, no, my vehicle's fine, I have everything clipped into place, no problem, not my big deal. So one of the other competitors comes in and she says, just so everybody knows, stuff's getting pulled out of vehicles. So I go, oh, okay, I'll go check on my car, make sure I haven't lost anything. So I walk down and I can see my sunshades kind of flapping in the wind, but everything still seems pretty attached to my vehicle. So I go into my driver's door to roll my windows up a little bit to reduce some of the airflow coming through my vehicle, tuck in my ribbons and stuff inside my console so that I don't lose any of those into the parking lot, and then I glance at my windshield and it's naked. It's not wearing its clothes. So I put two and two together, and I realized that that big shiny thing that I saw blow past the door while I was inside talking to the secretary was actually my custom made windshield cover. And this is when you see sort of the camaraderie of dog sports show itself, because I started running down the parking lot in the direction that my sunshield had gone, and I was yelling, "That's a custom fit sunshield!" And the next thing I know, like 4 women have dropped what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because the idea of a custom fit sunshield is so appealing and important to dog sport people that now 4 other people had abandoned everything in their own vehicles, and we were all running down the parking lot blindly into this industrial area looking for my sunshield.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now, we did find it.
You did find it?
It's right here.
Success?
Yeah, it was under a picnic table outside of a warehouse, so it had got all caught up, and I got my sunshield back. A couple people did lose a little bit of cash that was sitting on their dashboards, so I do recommend securing things inside your wonderful airflow-filled vehicle a little bit, but I was really happy to get my custom-made sunshield back at the end of the day, because I actually do not know how much this would cost me to replace. However, I would replace it because I do think that it's completely worth having one that fits your vehicle well.
I think I'm going to go look for one right after this, to be honest.
It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Okay, so now that we've got our windshield covered, we want to maintain airflow while also putting up sort of the same reflective barrier on the rest of our vehicle. There's a couple ways we can do it. One way is through the use of an illuminette, but before I was able to source and afford an illuminette, I actually got away with using white bed sheets are a really good option, or even sort of thick duvets over the top of your vehicle prevents your vehicle from taking a lot of the sun from the top, because you're getting that layer of insulation. The white color helps because that's going to reflect more than it absorbs, but honestly, a sheet or a blanket does just as well as an expensive piece of equipment like an Illuminate. I did switch to the Illuminate because what it is it's not a solid piece of fabric. It is actually a woven it's essentially woven tin foil is kind of what it looks like. So you can actually see a little bit of light gets through. Generally an Illuminate is anywhere from 70 to 90% shade, but wind can pass through it freely. So you don't have the insulating property when you use an Illuminate, but the reflection of the Illuminate is so good that it just kind of bounces the light right off your vehicle, and you're not going to get a ton of heat in your vehicle that way. So I have a couple different ones. These come in all sorts of different sizes. They can be big enough to just throw over your entire vehicle all in one piece, or they can come in smaller sections like mine. I bought mine in smaller sections because essentially it was economics. I could only afford so much square footage of Illuminate at a time, so I gradually sourced Illuminate in pieces until I had enough to essentially cover my vehicle. And if you look at a vehicle, generally there's going to be parts of it that take more sun than others. I don't worry about having my Illuminate go all the way to the ground because generally the sun is hitting the higher parts of your vehicle, and those are the least insulated parts too, so those are the ones you want to kick the sun off of a little bit more.
The most sun's going to come through your window area anyway.
Window area is where you're going to take the most sun for sure. Yeah. Covering the roof of the vehicle is generally pretty important, and that's where my used non-fitted sun shields from the windshield come in, is that I actually saved a lot of those, and what I'll do is I'll put those over top of the roof of my vehicle because I don't need the airflow on my roof, but I do need the reflection and the insulation. So I will use my old sun shields and I'll put them on the roof of my car so that any sun hitting the roof of my car bounces off, and then I can use my Illuminate to cover the parts of the car where I want to maintain airflow. All right, so now I've covered my vehicle in tinfoil, essentially. So my old car cover, my old windshield cover, is on my roof. That's to help reflect off any overhead sun that I get. So I have this insulated windshield cover covering my roof. It's actually wrapped around my cargo bar so that it's not getting away from me here. If you don't have a cargo bar though, you can actually just put it inside your door and just close your door on it and it'll do the same thing. I have my Illuminate covering the full length of my vehicle. At the front, I don't have anywhere to clip it, so I've actually just wedged it inside my door. At the bottom, to prevent it from blowing up in the wind and becoming useless, I've just put a clamp on it. And the clamps, you can just buy these big bulk packages of plastic clamps at any sort of hardware store or auto store. Really easy to find, just big plastic spring clamps that I keep in a little drill bag. And I just clipped it to my mud flap to prevent the bottom edge of this from flapping up. It's in my door, my window is open, I've got airflow, but I don't have sun coming into my vehicle. Back here, I've clamped it to my roof rack. Again, if you don't have a roof rack, you can just tuck the top edge inside your door. Or if you have a big enough Illuminate, you just cover your whole vehicle and drape it over the sides that way. And then around to the back, I've got my second piece of Illuminate covering the back of my vehicle with my hatch open. It's clamped to the hatch. I've got the Illuminate ideally so it's overlapping the window at the top, but for the most part, anything that's coming in that window, it's not the car that's heating up, it's just gonna blow out from behind the Illuminate. And the other nice thing about this is I now have a visual barrier for the dogs that are crated back here, they're not seeing people and other dogs walking past. They've got their own kind of little shaded tent, essentially, made out of the aluminette. I can just duck underneath here, get in to do whatever I need with my dogs. Again, we live in a very windy place, so I've used a bit of a bungee cord here attached to my trailer hitch, and it's just holding the bottom edge of the aluminette down. The aluminette comes with grommets in the edge, so I've just clipped one end of this bungee leash to the bottom of my aluminette and the other end to my trailer hitch, and that's preventing this back end from flopping up in the wind. If you don't have an aluminette, you can get the same effect using bed sheets, and that's actually what I used to do. And then there was the day that I was mistaken for somebody living in my car in an industrial parking lot, because my dogs were with me at work, but I couldn't bring them into work, but my house was being sold and it was showing. So I had to take my dogs to work. It was October, so it wasn't too bad for weather-wise, but it was still a little bit sunny and I didn't want them getting warmer than they had to. So I parked outside my office, which was an industrial area in Calgary, and I covered my car in an old Dora the Explorer blanket and a bunch of just dirty white bed sheets, like dog sheets. And the new landlord for the new complex that my business had moved into at the same time was very concerned about the vehicle in the parking lot that was covered in old blankets, and he was concerned that there was somebody living in their vehicle in his parking lot, but it was actually just me keeping my dogs out. So people ask fewer questions about the aluminette because it looks very professional and very purposeful, but you get the same effect from just hanging a white sheet over your car. So don't feel like you have to rush out and spend a whole bunch of money to achieve something like this. As long as you don't mind looking a little bit transient. Okay, so while we're waiting for our full effect here as the sun's coming out on our aluminette, I just want to quickly talk about sort of an optional piece of equipment that a lot of people really like in the dog world, and that is a construction fan. So these are battery operated fans that move a lot of air, and they have these really powerful lithium ion batteries that come with them. So they're rechargeable fans. The two most popular brands are the Ryobi, which are those kind of lime green tools, and the Rigid, which is the orange tool that I have. And these are really cool because you can either plug the fan in or you can use a battery. And the batteries are these high capacity batteries. You can get 2 amps, or I have 4 amp batteries. And one of these batteries will actually run this fan constantly for about 8 hours on medium high. So you can move a lot of air over a weekend on one battery. The other cool thing is you can buy extra batteries, or you can buy tools often that are on sale. So if I wanted to buy another battery, I could go out and buy a Rigid drill, and it would come with a battery, and the batteries are actually interchangeable between most of their tools. So you get tools and you get spare batteries for your dog fan.
That's a great tip.
I think it's a great tip. And so the battery packs just pop in here, crank the fan on. They move an amazing amount of air. They're really portable. And they're super durable. I've dropped this out of my car several times without it actually being wrecked. And essentially what I'll do with these is I want to create more airflow. Fans themselves will not cool your dog down. Your dog doesn't sweat in the way that we do for that cooling effect. But the purpose of a fan is not to cool your dog down. It's to cool the air in your vehicle, to exchange it with cooler air from outside. So it's all about increasing that airflow. So I'll often actually put it towards the front of my vehicle, and I will have it there kind of pushing the air out the back hatch. So it's not blowing directly on my dogs at any given time. It's just moving air and keeping that air circulating in the vehicle as much as possible. So these can be a little bit pricey, but they actually go on sale quite a bit. You watch Home Depot, Lowe's, Flyers, things like that. They'll go on sale quite a bit. The batteries, like I said, are available. If you buy a drill or something, you can often get a battery and a drill for less than the cost of a battery by itself. And the charges last for ages too. So even if they sit for a while without being charged, I just charged mine for the spring after it sat all winter, and it was only missing one bar. It's got lights on it, so you can press the button and test. It tells you how much time you have.
But it sounds like one battery would last you all day, even at a pretty high.
Yeah, I often take 2 batteries with me to a weekend event, and I usually only end up using 1. Unless it's very hot, then I run my fan more, but I tend to only turn my fan on kind of midday. But I like having it in my trailer too. It really increases airflow in my camper if I'm camping. Okay, so after we've gone through all this trouble to cover the car, we've invested in fans, crates, everything like that, it's really easy to say, hey Monica, why didn't you just turn on your engine and run your air conditioning? And the reason behind that is actually kind of a little bit more complex. Air conditioning is great in some scenarios, specifically while your vehicle is in motion. The problem with running your air conditioning while your vehicle is idling in the sun is that our vehicle engines are actually not that great at keeping themselves cool. That's why we have radiators and things like that. But if you've ever been traveling, say on a really hard, steep climb in the mountains, and it's 35 degrees outside, and you get to that rest stop at the top and everybody's sitting there with their hoods open, it's because their engines were getting too hot. And the best way to cool your engine is to have your vehicle in motion. So when you're running your air conditioning and you've got all your windows closed and you've got your vehicle idling under the sun, or if you thought maybe, okay, well, I'll insulate my hood, you put a blanket over top of it, what you're actually doing is you're overheating your engine. And when you overheat your engine, a couple things can happen. You can be inside running a dog at your event, you've got your other dog in the car, your engine overheats and it'll actually stall, it'll stop working. If you're not there when that happens, your vehicle's gonna heat up really fast because your engine's cut off, you've lost your air conditioning, you've lost everything else, and you've potentially wrecked your car, which gets pretty expensive. The other thing that can happen, and is a little more risky because you think your car is running just fine, is that you actually end up burning out your air conditioner because your engine overheats. So it kills your air conditioner, but your engine's still running and your fans are still going, but now the air that's coming into your vehicle from those fans is hot air directly off of your engine. You've got your vehicle all sealed up, you've got your engine producing heat, and you have your fans blowing that into your vehicle. And unfortunately, if you walk past your car and go, oh yeah, my engine's still running, that's great, then you don't know that you're actually pumping hot air into your vehicle. So I personally will never idle my car and run my air conditioning on a hot day because of the risk of damaging my vehicle and harming anything that I have inside of it is just a little bit too high. So I never recommend idling and running your air conditioning unless you're sitting in the vehicle yourself to monitor how hot your engine's getting and to make sure that it's still blowing cold air for you. Okay, so we've had the vehicle sitting under the sun for a little bit now. If you'll recall at the beginning of this, when I had it all closed up, sitting under the sun, kind of actually earlier this morning, we checked the temperature and it was 29 degrees Celsius inside the vehicle. Now when I pull the thermometer out with all of my shade on the sunny side of the vehicle, we're standing on the shady side of the vehicle, so it's not covered. But on my sunny side of the vehicle, I've got all my stuff set up and I now have a temperature reading of 17.4 degrees Celsius on the thermometer. So we have managed to drop this vehicle temperature from 29 to 17 degrees Celsius, and we started filming about 11 o'clock this morning and it's now about 1 o'clock, so we're actually into the warmest part of the day and my vehicle is now cooler than it was first thing this morning. So we're just going to let this get the air temperature outside and see if we have a difference, see if it's warmer or cooler outside the vehicle, and we'll check back in with you in just a moment when we have that reading as well. Okay, Okay, so we've been sitting the thermometer out in my lawn chair to see what the outside temperature is. So we got our vehicle temperature down from 29 degrees Celsius to 17 degrees Celsius, and we've been watching this thermometer, and it's currently reading 18.7 degrees Celsius. So the vehicle's about 1 degree cooler than this thermometer currently is. But while we were waiting for the temperature to set, it actually fluctuated sort of between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius. So a very pleasant day to be outside, but you can see that the vehicle stayed just as cool as the outside air temperature on this kind of overcast sort of May day in the spring. Actually it just bumped up to 19 because the sun came out from the cloud while I was talking here. So we actually have a vehicle right now that's staying a couple degrees cooler than the outside air temperature when the sun comes out. So that's the goal with keeping your vehicle under cover, is airflow, shade, and keeping your vehicle cooler than the outdoor temperature, which is now sitting at 19.5 degrees Celsius.
All right, so I just wanted to pop in quickly and thank Monika again for sharing all this information with us. I know I've got a few things that I'd like to go out now and buy for my own car, but it was really great to see how well her setup worked to cool off her vehicle, and how much safer that's going to be for our dogs when and if we do have to leave them in the car, either in an emergency or at a trial. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.